herald of the Word of God.
Yeah, I was about to say the sword of salvation, like the word, like
The Word.
Yeah.
Very good, because I've written it down. Indeed, the Word of God is living and effective, sharper than any two-edged sword, penetrating even between soul and spirit, joints and marrow, and able to discern reflections and thoughts of the heart. So that is why symbolically we often find the sword in St. Paul's hand. This is, of course, from the letter to the Hebrews, which used to be attributed to St. Paul. Then later on, scholars actually think it is not so clear who wrote it. But that is why symbolically somehow the sword has always stuck to Paul for these two reasons: for his martyrdom and because it is a symbol for the Word of God. And I thought it could be a good thing, as St. Paul was a really great communicator, to take some time to maybe think what he can teach us for our work as communicators. Oh, sorry. I will come this way so that I can look at you all. So I was thinking about it a little bit, and first of all, Paul had a very clear message to communicate, which was the gospel of Jesus Christ and the salvation that he has in store for each and every one of us. This came from a personal experience, from a very strong one. So I was thinking that maybe it is always a good thing when we work as communicators to think back to that moment in which we maybe owned our faith, the moment in which we perhaps really started to believe the things that we may have received from our parents, or if we had like a really strong moment of conversion, to just keep it in the back of our minds, because that often helps. Like if we're communicating something that is grounded in experience, it is often much more effective when we talk about it, precisely because it is not just something that we've heard about, but it is something that is connected to our lives in very concrete ways. Second of all, what strikes me about St. Paul is his cultural awareness, and also the fact that he was always studying the context he was living in very well. So I like this part in, I think it was the letter to Corinthians, in which Paul shows that he is very cultural aware, because while he preaches at some point, he says that while he was walking, he sees a small altar, and there is something written beneath it that is to an unknown God. So Paul immediately takes this small detail and he weaves it into his speech, and he says, oh, you know, you worship this unknown God, well, I announce this unknown God to you. So he's very quick to catch the glimpses maybe of the transcendent in the ordinary, and he communicates them immediately to other people. At the same time, within this same speech, he quotes extensively from Greek philosophers and poets. So he shows that he's really very well grounded in the culture that he is addressing. And that is something that is useful for us as well, because of course, even though we're not of the world, we're still living in it, and we should know it well in order to be able to engage with it in a fruitful way. The third thing is, Paul was not a megalomaniac who just thought the gospel was about preaching himself, but he knew that in order to share the gospel, you are part of a network of people, and that you really need a community to help you and sustain you as you announce the gospel. Especially in these times, it can be so hard, because we may face rejection, and people will criticize us and the Pope and the values we believe in, and you know, so many different things. So it is really important to have a community who somehow supports us, that we can go to draw strength and inspiration from. And this is something that St. Paul really used to do a lot. Inside we will also see there are some paintings representing his life. There are some people who were very important in his life, like Timothy, like Aquila and Priscilla. So Paul really knew that the gospel isn't shared on your own and by your own strength, but it is also thanks to the people and the relationships that surround us that we draw strength from, and that help us to announce the gospel to the people. Another thing is perseverance. perseverance that really characterized him. Now, I know that you've also been speaking about hope-telling and things like that. That is something I think St. Paul was really great at. If you think about it, he writes the letter to the Philippians while he is in prison. And the only thing he says is, I say to you, rejoice in the Lord always. I say to you again, rejoice. So this kind of makes us understand, like, he's imprisoned, he was like without any kind of freedom, and yet he was encouraging the people who were not in prison to rejoice, because evidently they were really not. So this is something I think that we can also take for our own lives, to remember to really have this strong relationship with the Lord, because otherwise we can have challenging times and difficult moments, but it is always important to keep nourishing our hope, because we are going to be the channels through which God's hope is going to come to his people. And this is also something for which we can look to Paul. At the same time, Paul was very real about his human struggles, so he did not pretend that he was perfect at all. On the contrary, I mean, his letters are full of references to the importance that of the episodes where he experienced that weakness is actually the place where God can meet us and transform us. So, for instance, well, anyway, we will speak about it later, but it is my power is made perfect in weakness, right? That is St. Paul. And that is something that he very concretely experienced, because he wasn't such an easy person to be around, very probably. I mean, we know that he persecuted the Christians. So, of course, the Lord arrived in his life, but it took the Lord a long time to go through a transformative process with Paul, because Paul didn't change. He was transformed and transfigured, but he was always the same Paul. So this is something to keep in mind for us as well. Another thing is, I think that he used different kinds of mediums to reach the people that he was engaging in. So he did not just write epistles, he also preached to people, and then of course he had personal encounters with people. And the same thing is true for us as well. So I think it's always important to really think about the different channels that we can use to share the gospel with others, and also to maybe try and keep updated with the best tools and channels that are available to us now, and also to try exploring different ways of conveying the gospel message. Even better than we're doing now. I think